We are in the penultimate week of James. I was going for R, but let's just, we're in the penultimate week of James. It's been a really good series, hasn't it? I'm glad you all think so. I'm really sad too, just like all of you. Have you enjoyed going through James? Yes. Excellent. There we go. My big takeaway, like Caroline's, is, as I said a couple of weeks ago, I thought that James was going to be a positive encouragement for us, telling us the right way to live, and instead I found, as I've gone through it, is pointed out all of my dodgy bits, all the bits that aren't quite up to God's standard, and I didn't want it to be like that, and I didn't anticipate it being like that, and yet, at least for me personally, that's been a real challenge. As we've been going through, James, you know, it's full of short, sharp advice. There we go. You knew what I was going to say anyway. And a lot of that has been hard to hear. And I think it's really good that we now come into the last few sections of this letter. Started with Getch last week, the more encouraging news, the more building up bit after tearing us all down a little bit. And James is mostly encouraging in these last few verses. So should we read together from James chapter 5? We're going to start at verse 7 and finishing at verse 12. Only a couple of verses, but they're quite full-on long ones. I think it's going to be lovely. It's on the screen, so should we all read it together? Yeah, this is the encouraging one as well, isn't it? I'm not really going to talk about that last verse very much, but actually it is probably the more challenging bit of that. Let your yes be yes and your no be no, as James has said multiple times already throughout this series. But the sun has been out this week, hasn't it? As we said at the beginning, hooray! It was just for a moment, I know. And it has me really excited for spring and being out in the garden again. I've been, as I've gotten older, I've become less fond of winter and more fond of spring and summer, especially just being outside in the garden. So I love spring and summer now. I like being outdoors. I wrote most of this talk sitting in the garden, which is like a long-awaited thing since about probably October. I haven't been able to do that, so that's been nice. As you know as well, I love food and cooking, and so I've been using the outdoor pizza oven, which has been nice to cook loads of stuff out there because it's actually been sunny enough that I can do that. And it's been a nice taste of spring, hasn't it? Albeit Wednesday was pretty good, and some glimpses here, there, and not quite as everyone perhaps like. But we're starting to see buds on the trees, aren't we? There are signs of spring coming. It didn't last very long, admittedly, because now it's rainy again today. But we are starting to see spring coming. Despite the gloomy skies and the rain, spring is very close to us now. And of course, you'll understand as we go through this why we're looking forward to spring from these verses. Have that in mind as we go through this few verses. So James starts off with a nice call to be patient, as he normally does. Be patient as we await Jesus' return. Take courage, for the coming of Jesus, like spring, there we go, there's our tenuous link, is near. James is very much, he's very likely to be aware of the state of the church at the time he's writing this. He himself is based in Jerusalem, but no doubt he would have had a catch-up with Paul, perhaps Peter, perhaps Luke, and others as he would have gone about ministry as the early church began to grow. So although he's based in Jerusalem, he'd have no doubt known somewhat of the state of the church across the Middle East and into Rome, or at least across the Roman Empire. Even though just a few years after Jesus ascended, when this letter is being written, the church is facing persecution, and they are probably struggling. They've not necessarily anticipated quite what life was going to be like after Jesus had ascended into heaven. They're probably struggling. And despite the fact that they may well have known their theology well, and that Jesus was going to return, no doubt, I'm sure, like many of the early church, they were getting impatient. Perhaps they don't know exactly when it will be. Perhaps they don't know exactly the theology behind it, but they know that Jesus is meant to be coming back, and they've been told that he's meant to be coming back soon. They're looking forward to when everything is made new, to when the metaphorical grey skies have gone and the metaphorical spring sun comes out and flowers start to bloom. Looking forward to a day with no more crying or pain. And so either way, regardless of whether they knew exactly what was meant to be happening, exactly when Jesus was coming back, exactly anything around that topic, James reassures them, don't worry guys, be patient. Jesus is coming back and it will be soon. And the bit that I really liked, I think, is it on the next verse? Sorry? Oh no, maybe it's a slightly different translation. Let me look quickly here. There we go. Take courage, for the coming of the Lord is here. In verse 8, it's translated slightly differently on there, I think. Stand firm, there you go. But I love that. Take courage. You don't think it's a courageous thing to do, to be patient, do you? But as we know, it often is. Of course, you'll have no doubt realised the moderate irony in James saying Jesus is coming soon, because this letter was written about 2,000 years ago. And unless you're very, very patient, you'll think that 2,000 years isn't that soon. You know, this week I got annoyed that an Amazon parcel, and this is genuinely true, came 2 days instead of 1 day. And I was like, that is so annoying. I wanted that next day. Of course, I didn't need it next day either. It was just the fact that I thought it was going to be next day, and it wasn't. Of course, it's been 2,000 years, and so maybe the natural question for you is, did James get it wrong? Yeah. In short, no is the answer. And one thing that I've always found fascinating about the start of the early church is many of the early disciples lived in a way that assumed that Jesus coming back soon meant soon on their terms. I don't know exactly what time frames they might have had in their mind, but I wonder if it was, right, Jesus is nipping up into heaven, he's starting the slow-cooked Texas barbecue brisket, he's getting everything ready for us, he's preparing us, making the beds, and in a week or two, he'll be back, and then we'll all be having a party in heaven. Of course, that didn't quite pan out as they thought. I wonder if they thought, though, that it was just a few short weeks or short months where they'd do the business down on earth just for a short time, and then Jesus would come back. Anyway, that was slightly wrong, wasn't it? I don't think they were expecting a few thousand years, though. Of course, we know that Jesus is coming back soon, but soon for God is slightly different from soon to us. As I said with my Amazon delivery, soon delivery terms is probably next day, maybe 2 days, but soon for God could be anything. And so we are to expect Jesus coming back. It is going to happen soon, albeit not our soon, but God's soon. And so we need to be ready for it, as many other scriptures say. We need to be expecting it. And as James says, to take courage, to be patient. Again, coming back to spring, the clouds are starting to clear. We are seeing signs of the clouds going. We are seeing signs of the buds on the trees, even though they haven't quite got their leaves yet. Next, James, seemingly randomly, I think, especially when you see it one verse at a time, it feels a bit here, there, and everywhere, a bit scatty. James randomly, apparently, starts talking about judging again. So we look at verse 9. Yeah, don't grumble against each other, brothers, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. And again, this seems a bit random coming out of there, especially since Getch talked about this last week. It's like, yeah, James, you've already mentioned that. What's going on? Why are you saying it again? I actually think, though, it follows on quite nicely. I had a slight revelation. Perhaps it was just quite simple and I hadn't spotted it before, but I think it follows on quite nicely because James basically says, if Jesus is coming, then for goodness sake, stop gossiping. Stop moaning about each other because Jesus is right there. It would be like me gossiping to someone while holding a microphone and you all being able to hear it, and I think I'm doing it in secret, whereas you've all heard just what I've said about Martin and his opinions on Portsmouth. Or even worse, perhaps I was talking to someone there about how I was secretly a Southampton fan. Exactly, there we go, yeah, thank you. That would be dumb, wouldn't it? Let's be honest. So this is what James is saying. For goodness sake, stop using a microphone and gossiping about one another. But more importantly, in all seriousness, he's saying stop gossiping about others. Stop arguing with each other. Jesus is just around the corner. And that lovely line of the judge is standing at the door. You know, if we're going to be judged for our gossip, for our, what does he say on the screen there? Grumbling against each other and the fights and the quarrels that James has already talked about. It's like doing it with Jesus right next door. And he's and going, guys, come on, stop it. Focus on what matters. It'll be a whole other talk for another time, so I won't go into that. But I think gossip is one of the biggest problems in the modern church. I think it so easily masquerades as other things. It's a sin that pretends to be helpfulness or supportiveness when actually it's rooted in being nosy, judgy, and obviously gossiping. So anyway, James says we need to stop grumbling and fighting and quarrelling throughout the letter. That's what the words that he uses, and taking matters into our own hands, because Jesus is coming back and he will be the judge anyway. And this is the lovely bit that I never spotted before preparing this. If Jesus is coming back and Jesus is the judge, then we're not here to judge others, as Getch talked about last week, as James has literally just written. Guys, Jesus is the judge. Stop judging each other. That's not your job. Particularly, I think, if we today we've got a problem with someone's actions, if we've got a problem with something in the world, some sort of injustice, or how we have been wronged or feel angry about something, then we look back to the verses preceding this. Be patient, because Jesus is almost here. Take courage. Jesus is almost here. And when he comes, and he will be coming soon, he will bring perfect justice and exercise perfect judgment. And that includes, unfortunately, on us, as well as the people that we would perhaps like to be judged. If Jesus is coming back soon, then quite simply, we need to stop grumbling about each other, because we'll be judged for it, and he is listening and right around the corner after all. James quickly then moves on to give an example about patience in suffering. For the perfect examples of patience in suffering, James looks to the prophets and to Job. And they are reminders, of course, across the prophets and across Job, as David has talked about Job before, of the need to build stamina and endurance when we face trouble. But then ultimately, this is a wonderful encouragement. The Lord is full of compassion and full of mercy. And again, slightly different translation that I have, if I can find the right bit. You can see how the Lord was kind to Job in the end, for the Lord is full of tenderness and mercy. I love that. I love that. Kind is such a good word to describe God. There are many good words to describe God, and God is not only kind, he is so much more, but it's such a wonderful, all-encompassing term that God shows extreme kindness. There is so much to explore in this bit, and not really time to do it justice, so I'm going to sort of skip over it just a little bit. And we're going to look, I'm going to do a James and prompt you to read through the prophets and read through Job. That will give you all the answers you need on this one about patience and suffering, particularly Job. But feel free to have a look at the stories of the prophets as well. People like Jeremiah, Isaiah, or Amos, and you'll see all that demonstrated. But coming to finish with a more modern example, there is a wonderful song by Corey Asbury which is called Kind. If you know it, then great, but I'm not expecting you to know it. But Corey Asbury's the guy who wrote Reckless Love. I'm sure that you'll recognise that song. We've done it here a few times, I know. And his song Kind is a very moving and very honest song. It's not really a worship song. It doesn't kind of lend itself to that, but it's an expression of his heart, of his worship to God. And I think it's a really good lead into communion. And basically this song is all about how life doesn't happen the way we want it to. Life doesn't work out how we want things to, and the song is all about the challenges that life throws at us. Things that we've done and things that we have had done to us. It's a very honest reaction to that. And as we go through, as you listen to the song, which we're going to listen to shortly, it is normal to be angry. It is normal to want to try and run away. It is normal to try everything we ever have, and yet despite everything that is thrown at us, despite all the challenges that we all face, God has only ever been kind to us. And I just find this song so moving. I think that word kindness is so all-encapsulating, that God has only ever been kind to us. Doesn't necessarily mean life is fair. Doesn't necessarily mean you've got the answers you wanted. Certainly doesn't mean that God has answered you in the way that you wanted him to. But yet he has shown us and poured out kindness upon kindness upon kindness. And it has quite possibly one of the best lines of any modern worship song too. In verse 3, again, we'll listen to it so you can enjoy it in its context. But I know I wasn't there, but when I look up at the cross, I see the darkest day in history, so I guess that's what kindness costs. And again, we've got crosses on the walls here. We've got the areas in our life that we want Jesus to break through. And so in some ways, this ties in nicely to that, as sort of the opposite though, really. I know I wasn't there, but when I look up at the cross, I see the darkest day in history. I guess that's what kindness cost. When we need it and when we don't deserve it, he still displays his kindness with arms stretched out on the cross. And so a slight tangent, admittedly from James, but an encouragement to us in suffering to exercise patience. Patience to endure the suffering, but then also patience and courage that Jesus is coming back soon. But in the meantime, God will continue to and constantly pour out his kindness on you, pour out his love and his affection on you. In spite of all the kinds of suffering and challenges, God is there. As the song talks about as well, in addictions, in failing marriages, in miscarriages, in tragic accidents, in appalling evil, in our own wrongdoing, in broken families, in spiritual battles, in physical war, when God heals and when he doesn't, when he seemingly doesn't answer prayer, in wrestling with life's biggest and most unanswerable questions, God is kind. Unreasonably, unbelievably, unfathomably kind. And so no matter what season of life you might be in, whether you feel like it has been winter for a very long time, or even if you feel like you're in spring or summer, the invitation this morning through the song and as it leads into communion is to open yourself up to God's kindness, to let his love flow over you. So we're going to listen to this song and then we'll lead into communion afterwards.
Sometimes marriages don't work. Sometimes babies die. Sometimes rehab turns to relapse, and you're left just asking why. And for all the prayers I've prayed, I still wonder if he's real. And if he is, how is he choosing who he does and doesn't heal? I've tried to run from Jesus, I've started holy wars. I've tried the patient waiting and the kicking down the doors. I've cursed his name in anger with my fist raised to the sky. And in return, all he's ever been is kind. And I burned my share of bridges. I learned to tuck my tail and run, to watch the wreckage in the rear view from all the crooked things I've done. And I know that he forgives me, but it's hard to forgive myself. I can't help but think amazing grace is for everybody else. I've tried to run from Jesus, I started holy wars. I tried the patient waiting and the kicking down the doors. I've cursed his name in anger with my fist raised to the sky. And in return, all he's ever been is kind. All he's ever been is kind. And I know I wasn't there, but when I look up at the cross, I see the darkest day in history, and I guess that's what kindness cost. I've tried to run from Jesus, I've started holy wars. I tried the patient waiting and the kicking down the doors. He knows I don't deserve it, but he's never